welcome to my channel. Today is an installment of Do You Know the Difference Between Fairykei and Sweet Lolita? These are both Japanese fashions that are associated with a pastel color palette and kawaii motifs, and they are frequently confused with each other by people that are outside of the subculture. So today, we are going to break down the differences. Fairykei is a J-fashion that was created sometime in the early 2000s. Its creation is typically attributed to Sayuri Tabuchi, aka Tavuchi, the owner of Spank. She contests this mantle. Fairykei is known for its strict pastel color palette, vintage 80s or Yumekawa motif texture, and triangular silhouette. In order for a co-word to meet the criteria for Fairykei, it needs to have a proper balance of the following: silhouette, texture/layers, and details/motifs. And of course, the pastel color palette. Colors that are too muted or too bright are only seen in small quantities in Fairykei when they're properly balanced. Colors like red are basically never seen. Varying texture and layers are very common, including lace, tulle, cotton, mesh, sherpa, etc. Fairykei can range from no layering to many layers. The silhouette you will most typically see is triangular, such as this, the bottoms being slightly wider than the top. Bottoms can range from things like petticoats to pants. Elegant Gothic Lolita, or EGL, is a J-fashion that has roots as far back as the 70s in natural kei and otome. EGL is largely inspired by the Victorian and Rococo eras. First street snaps that are seen as the very beginnings of Lolita are from the 90s, and EGL as we know it today really started to take off in like 2000-2001. Co-words from this time are known as old school Lolita. Lolita is known for its cupcake or bell-shaped silhouette, which is achieved by using a petticoat, maybe even several petticoats, sometimes even hoop skirts. It's also known for its emphasis on modesty. Colors and motifs will largely depend on which substyle a Lolita is wearing. Sweet Lolita is one of the three main substyles, which are Gothic, Classic, or Sweet. I could not find an exact point at which Sweet became a recognized substyle. I even asked the Lolita subreddit, and the best estimation is sometime between the mid-90s and early 2000s. There are street snaps that would be considered old school Sweet Lolita going back to about 2000. And the first edition of the Gothic Lolita Bible references Sweet, so it's safe to say pre-2001. At this time, Sweet Lolita was much less over the top than it is now, and main pieces tended to be more like solid pastel colors rather than the prints that are typically seen today. Over the top, or OTT Sweet Lolita, started to emerge sometime in the mid to late 2000s. This is the substyle that is most frequently confused with Fairykei. The main components of a Lolita co-word are a skirt or dress, a blouse, legwear, a petticoat, a headdress, and shoes. In modern Sweet EGL, you will frequently see skirts or JSKs in pastel, a wide range in kawaii motifs for the prints. Blouses, accessories, and shoes will also typically be pastel and match something that's on the print. That being said, Sweet Lolita can also be found in a range of darker colors, from black to red. You will sometimes hear the mixture of blacks and like the sweet pastel prints being called Bittersweet Lolita. However, this title is very controversial in the Lolita community, which I can get into in another video if there's interest. Over the Top Sweet does tend to hone in on pastels, and motifs are often closer to Yumekawa, sometimes even being Yumekawa. The accessorizing is, as the name suggests, over the top and significantly heavier than you would usually see in Lolita. Colorful wigs or hair is also very common in this style. Much like Fairy Decora, there is an acceptable cross between Lolita and Fairykei.
Fairykei Lolita or Lolita Fairykei or Fairy Lolita or Lolita Fairy, depending on who you ask.
It's a little bit hard to pinpoint exactly how this differs from Over the Top Sweet Lolita. There is just sort of like a vibe that makes the two different. Silhouette tends to be a little bit less poofier and closer to Fairykei's triangular silhouette. Motifs tend to be more strictly in line with Yumekawa or 80s vintage, the strict pastel color palette is stuck to, and other fairykei elements not typically seen in Lolita are played up. So what are the differences then, really? One of the biggest ones is the silhouette. While they may sound similar, the cupcake or bell-shaped silhouette that is seen in Lolita is much too wide and poofy for fairykei. Vast majority of petticoats used in Lolita would not be acceptable in fairykei as they're too long and have too much volume. Fairykei's petticoats would be much too short for Lolita and would not have nearly enough poof to create that bell shape when put under a knee-length dress or skirt. On the topic of petticoats, they are frequently used as a main piece in fairykei, whereas in Lolita, they are more like an undergarment, and it's actually considered a Lolita faux pas to be able to see your petticoat in a co-word. Bloomers in fairykei versus EGL also differ from each other, as fairykeis are short and poofy, and Lolitas tend to be longer, more like traditional bloomers, and are also, like petticoats in Lolita, used as undergarments. Other clothing items also vary greatly, as in fairykei, you'll frequently see t-shirts, sweaters, peignoirs, cutsews, whilst Lolita tends to only have cutsews or blouses as the top, unless someone's wearing a one-piece, which means like the dress has sleeves. And t-shirts are only seen in casual Lolita. Lolita will always have a dress or skirt, but those aren't necessary for fairykei. For a fairykei co-word, pants and bloomers are acceptable for the bottoms. Modesty can be achieved in fairykei, it's not integral to it like it is in Lolita. Short bottoms are acceptable, as are bare shoulders and legs. Another key difference is accessorizing. Headdresses or hats of some kind are almost always seen in EGL, whereas in fairykei, you can completely forego headdresses or even just wear like hair clips. Fairykei also tends to utilize jewelry that is more childhood-esque, such as candy, jewelry made from toys or plushie, etc. Whilst you may see overlapping jewelry in over-the-top suite, candy and more overt, like childhood-esque or costume jewelry is not seen often in the rest of Lolita. Leg warmers and slouchy socks are also very common in fairykei, whereas leg warmers or like big wide slouchy socks are referred to as Ida in the Lolita community. Lastly, as we discussed earlier, Sweet Lolita has a wide range of acceptable colors, including red, which is like basically outlawed in fairykei. Motifs tend to be broader in Sweet Lolita, with general kawaii motifs being common in prints, whereas in fairykei there is a very heavy emphasis on 80s, vintage, and Yumekawa motifs. Those are the biggest differences. If I missed anything, feel free to share below. Be sure to subscribe, as I will be posting more videos in this series. What's the difference between fairykei and insert other pastel fashion? Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to drop it down below if you have any other questions about fairykei or jfashion in general.